Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Transform Your Organization Through Culture Change workshop. My name is Brian Littlehale. I'm the owner and president of Vitruvian Leadership here in lovely Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. And what I wanted to share with you is a little bit about myself. I've been in the leadership and employee development arena for over 25 years. I've worked in the industry of, direct mail, transportation, financial services industry, and of course, the housing authority industry. I've done tens of thousands of hours of executive coaching and professional development coaching, and I absolutely love what I do. And so today I'm looking forward to sharing with you a little bit about our methods and our systems, and also wanted to take some time to introduce you to our models, and more importantly, want to introduce Dan Farrell, who is the executive director of the Allentown Housing Authority. And so, Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning. As Brian said, I'm Dan Farrell. I'm the executive director of the Allentown Housing Authority. This is actually my 30th year in the public housing business, which seems like it started yesterday, but time has flown by. Here in Allentown, we have about 45, 46 employees. We have a little over 2,500 units in between public housing, Section 8, and some project-based properties. We've done R.E.A.D, we've done mixed finance, we've done Hope 6. So we have a pretty diverse housing portfolio, and so we're the laboratory for this successful experiment we're talking about today.
Sorry to do that, Dan. A little bit of control issues here on the screen, so bear with me. What I wanted to talk about is, let me see if I can get better control of of course, this is how it always works. Right when you get started, for some reason, I need to lower this bar, hide. There we go. Hide the bar. That's what I'm trying to do. Options. Oh, well, there we go.
There you go.
So I wanted to start with 3 organizational oversights that negatively impact culture. You kind of got a precursor here. Organizational oversight number 1 is that they give vague feedback, or worse yet, none at all. In fact, 4 out of 10 workers are actively disengaged when they get little or no feedback. SHRM actually did a report, and they found that 82% of employees feedback. Truth is that employees really truly do want to know what they're doing right, and also what they can improve. And so a very, very important aspect of leadership is being able to provide the appropriate feedback. Oversight number 2 is that they don't recognize their team's strengths, roles, and responsibilities effectively. The E-Factory, which is a company out of England, did a pretty cool survey and did enough research where they were able to determine that employees who experience role clarity are 53% more efficient and 27% more effective at work than employees who have role ambiguity. So it is very clear that clear roles and responsibilities are extremely important to helping workers know what they need to do and when they need to do it. And what they also said is that if they're better equipped and engaged, their efficiency and effectiveness could potentially double. So again, employee clear roles and responsibilities is absolutely critical to helping your employees develop. Oversight number 3 is that they aren't equipping or developing their leadership. Literally 83% of businesses say it's important to develop leaders at all levels. 77% of organizations report they're experiencing a leadership gap. Only 1 in 10 people have the talent to lead in management. The good news is it can be learned. The emphasis here should really be about developing your leaders, again, at all levels. It's about creating an environment of growth and development. And so leadership, that's what we do. We really try to focus on developing the people or in an organization at all levels of the organization. Of course, we start with the executives, but ultimately we really are working with the core leadership team and helping the organization really define their core cultural values. Here's the interesting statistic, though. Only 5% of businesses have implemented leadership development strategies for all levels of their organization. So there's this need here where there's this huge desire to develop our people. What we find is that maybe 1 in 10 can grow, but the other thing is that it can be learned. And so that 5% is really is an interesting statistic, because what they're really pointing out is that leadership development is desired, but many organizations are not sure where or how to start that process. The truth is leadership development is equal parts soft and, of course, hard skills, which are often overlooked. The truth is we're used to more of the hard skills, the HR kind of perspective, coaching and corrective action, but we really don't teach our people. In general, we don't typically teach our employees really how some of those soft skills come into play, those relationship skills, and also some of the strategic approach. So performance gap interview, how do you hold that? What are the proper steps? So it's about intentionally implementing strategies and systems that are collaborative and really truly effective.
The other thing, it's also about it's creating that environment as well for growth and team development, and really consciously creating that environment and developing the environment so that people are comfortable in this process. And to kind of reinforce what Brian was saying earlier, this is not just the CEO or the executive director. This is, throughout the organization, and that's really critical. And that's where we here have seen a lot of our benefit.
Yeah, just to be clear, Dan and I started working together 4 years ago. I came in as a consultant, and 4 years ago, I strictly focused on him in the beginning as far as executive coaching. And what I really wanted to emphasize, and Dan, you can attest to this, is that let me ask you the question: is there a high correlation between how we lead our team and the impact on productivity and profitability of any organization?
Oh yeah, there's a high. I mean, it's just directly connected. So, and it's kind of one of those things that it's like so obvious. It's easy to overlook.
Yeah. What was your experience when I first started with you? What were some of the issues with the team and how you were visioning your future with the team?
Well, it was that in hindsight there was definitely kind of a lack of focus, and a lack of clarity. So through the work that we've done, we've really been able to focus in on what's important for the organization and the impact of that. And we're a housing authority, so it's not like we have a bottom line, but we don't have shareholders we have to report to and things like that. So, but we have limited resources. So HUD's not exactly throwing us extra cash or anything like that. And so it's really important to pay attention to that and see how those things all become connected.
Yeah, it's here's the interesting thing, and Dan and I were talking about this yesterday as we were going through the presentation. Is the reality is that the housing authority is no different than any other business, especially if it's a private business. The only difference is that this is a public business, so that transparency is very important, and of course, working with the board of directors. And helping them kind of create some of that vision with the executive director. So it's kind of a fascinating process, but it's very similar as a private organization. So let me. So as I was saying before, there's a high correlation between how we lead our team and the impact on productivity and profitability of the business. And so when I went in with Dan, one of the things that I really focused on was that a dollar saved is a dollar earned. A dollar sold is 20 cents earned. And what I'm trying to get at here is that there's a lot of cost savings that can be realized department to department. And that can affect the key performance areas, the operating income, the operating ratio of an organization. In a typical, private company, a dollar sold is literally 20 cents earned. So I said I was in the trucking industry. You can sell a product, but you're only walking away with maybe a 20-cent profit margin. The other 80 cents keeps the light on and goes towards salary and insurance and all the other things. So I tried to focus with Dan on that. A dollar saved is a dollar earned. What are the efficiencies? What are the effectiveness? And more importantly, do you have a team of leaders that really do strategic thinking and are true leaders and effective leaders? And if not, can we teach them? Can we get them there? Um, so it's really simple. Effective leaders lead effective teams. That's just the bottom line. Organizational culture and strategic visioning determine how we lead into the future, and that's what I focused on with Dan when I started working with him. And he had a lot of things in place, which was wonderful. But what was great is that he executed. How he led determined how the team executes. And I really truly believe that his leadership and the way that he went at this, very strategic, he got his team to start executing and looking at the numbers and becoming more engaged and equipped. How the team executes, of course, determines how the organizational functions. So if we can impact the key performance indicators in each area, in other words, if we're doing what we need to do here, how that drafts and how that affects the bigger organization is really what we were trying to focus on. So let's talk about strategic execution. Strategic execution is the result of our ability to collaboratively and realistically align people, time, resources, and attainable goals. Teams learn to effectively and tactically adjust along the way in an effort to deliver promised results. So let me kind of use an analogy here. Let's use a quarterback. We're going into playoff season, and the quarterback calls the strategic play in the huddle. However, when they all get up to the line, not only is the quarterback having to survey the defense, they're adjusting. They're making tactical moves to adjust along the way in order to deliver the promised result, which is to get either 10 yards or a touchdown. So that's what we kind of do with team. That's not what we kind of do. That's what we do. And I really want to define strategic thinking and planning, because I think it's extremely important to understand this concept. We are walking in, Vitruvian leadership is walking in, equipping, enlarging, and engaging a leadership team, not just Dan, the whole team at all levels. And we want them to get away from just planning their day. We want them to be strategic thinkers. We want to align them all together so that they understand the time, resources, and attainable goals. All right, so let me define this a little more in depth. When we look at this continuum here, we've got planning, and planning is simply this. If we start at the bottom here, the highly dissatisfied, it's really spontaneous. It's stagnant. It's a checklist. It's a to-do list. The potential to misuse resources is there because we're just kind of filling in. Tasks are kind of low-hanging fruit. It's something that we can get done and we can check off our list. If there's a setback, folks typically, when they're planning, see it as an emergency. And again, might go back to that whole idea of the potential misuse of resources. It really truly risks a culture of what I call confusion, and that those clear roles and responsibilities. If I were to go back to that screen, that creates the issues with clear roles and responsibility. Whereas strategic thinking is very different. It's dynamic. All right. It provides flexibility. Everybody's on the same page because there's been a collaborative approach. It's qualitative. They've actually looked at all their resources. They know what's going on, and it requires quantitative allocation of those resources. They know the numbers. the tasks become purposeful, efficient, and effective. Uh, if there is a setback, and it does happen, I mean, things change, right? It's not viewed as an obstacle. It's not viewed as a true setback. It's viewed more of as an obstacle. And MR stands for they have a measured response. People have a measured response because they're aware of everybody and all the moving parts. It's really where we live a culture of core values, and it's really it is about those core values. And the reason we're talking about strategic thinking is that it is where it all starts. Executives like Dan are in the position because they're strategic thinkers, and Dan is definitely a strategic thinker. And the DISC profile is a high CD, which is wonderful. And when I started coaching and working with Dan, we immediately identified the need for a baseline. Simply, where do we start? And so we talked about one of the first things that I try to do is walk in and say, Dan, let's do an employee survey. We need to do an employee survey. That's our baseline. How can we begin to identify those flash points or those pinch points that the organization is experiencing? It's kind of a 360 view of the organization, 360-degree assessment in a sense. Because we can start seeing how are we performing in each department? How are we looking?
One thing also to just to jump in here is, so this is not an exercise in meeting, how to plan a meeting or running effective meetings or anything like that. You know, we've all seen those or maybe even participated in those. This is how you what you include in the meeting, what your focus is. You know, we've all probably had at some point in time in our organization something happened, so we have to have a meeting, or we've all gone to a meeting and we've walked out of the meeting and gone, so what did we just do over the last hour? And so this isn't about that. This is about, you know, with establishing the core values and using those as we think and plan and move forward. So, you know, so this isn't, don't worry, we're not going to have a session here on how to put an agenda together and give somebody some minutes about this or some minutes about that. But this is really about how we focus on what we're thinking as we go through our day-to-day processes.
Yeah, it's really about alignment. How do you get the whole team to be aligned and thinking in the same way, and not just in a meeting room, like literally out with the team. And if you can imagine at a housing authority, they're scattered all over the place, and so you know, the whole idea is to help that team become highly satisfied. Which leads me into Dan sharing that baseline, that the employee survey that we did in 2017 and also in 2020. And it is remarkable, some of the changes that occurred. I was very pleased. And because I promised Dan when I started that we would get there, and we got there. So it was, and by no means are we done, but we got there. And that was the key thing. So Dan, please take it away.
Yeah, so this is just this slide just shows a summary and a comparison to the last two surveys that we've completed. We've done a number of surveys over the last 15 years since I've been here at the Housing Authority, and they've always been very valuable in identifying kind of what issues are. They've been kind of frustrating in the fact that they keep identifying the same issue. And so, you know, we realized after we had the survey in 2017, we had to do something different because we just weren't getting the results we were looking for. So the survey, just in general, for the statisticians in the crowd. So we, you know, it's broken up into seven categories. And then we have the staff divided into their respective groups: accounting, maintenance, administration, things like that, just to give us some statistical comparison to see if we have a problem in a department or if we have a specific problem like here with communication. Survey's anonymous. Staff fills it out, turn it in, it gets compiled. All these are on a 5-point scale, so they give a rating and answer questions. You know, the staff just, you know, we're a housing authority, so we're kind of split 50-50 civil service, and then our maintenance department is unionized. So that's just kind of the dynamic behind the group. And before we would do a survey, do some focus group work, and do some training. But really, if I had the survey prior to 2017 here, whatever year that was, you would not see the dramatic improvement that you see in these numbers here. I mean, almost a full point overall in the satisfaction with the organization from the staff. And so we have some of these categories broken down here to kind of highlight them a little more.
Just a real quick interjection here. Just at most companies, their biggest issue is communication. And I just, so I kind of wanted to highlight that whole communication category there, because that'll be the number one issue that you always hear statistically at any rate. So here's some of the other categories, Dan.
So speaking of communication, so this just shows the different departments and the comparison of 2020 to 2017. But as you can see, you see some pretty dramatic improvement in the communication. And as Brian said, you pretty much walk into any organization and you can just kind of say, okay, you've got communication issues. But this not only reflects my role and what I communicate to the staff, but how the staff communicates internally to itself. What information are supervisors sharing with the people they supervise? What information comes back up? So this is a very much part of the feedback loop and things like that as to what information is shared, what information comes back, what changes occur as a result of that. And you also have kind of that dynamic, of information is power. Well, I'm going to hold on to this and not tell anybody about it until that kind of scenario. And as you can see, we've made significant improvement here, and a lot of those issues have gone away.
Yeah, I think that maintenance one is that's huge.
Yeah. And here we have supervision, and not as dramatic of improvement as communication, but still improvement. And it this is more directly tied to the my relationship with my supervisor. It is really what this reflects, but it shows improvement there. It also starts to as we start to do the key performance indicators and performance areas, what those roles are and getting definition to those roles, so we are creating better supervisors. A lot of times we promote somebody into a supervisor position, and then we just kind of assume they've learned all they need to learn before that. And the reality is that's an ongoing training responsibility and need, and really pays dividends when you make that investment. We did a new category in this survey we had not done previously. We've done some conscious work on employee recognition. And there are it kind of goes from the simple to a little more elaborate. It's as simple as service pens. Here's my service pen, which probably doesn't show up very well on the screen. But for 1, 5, 10, 15 years, we at our quarterly staff meeting, we recognize employees at their at work anniversaries. And then we also, at those quarterly staff meetings, we have a nomination process. So somebody can nominate a fellow employee that's done something important or significant, and can then have them recognized in front of the staff as a whole. And we give a gift card to Wawa or a local restaurant that the employee can use to get coffee in the morning or go to lunch or whatever. So it's not a big dollar thing. Neither of these are big dollar things. Or there's not the parking spot in the parking lot or anything like that. But it's just small recognition in that respect, but important to to people. But the one that I think that we've done that's the most significant is we developed a comment. It's almost like a comment card. And I have one, and Brian has one here. That's probably a little hard to see, but this is more informal. But it's a card. It's about it's a thank you for living our core cultural value, and the idea behind this is employees can recognize each other, so it doesn't have to go through some nomination process or anything like that. When we have those events, and we've all had them, to where somebody does something, they help you with a project, they do something nice for someone else. This allows that recognition to happen more informally. And I walk around the office here, and I see these cards that staff have received from other staff, taped to the wall or taped to their cabinet or something to that effect. So you can tell by that kind of reflection that they're important, and they're well received. So we wanted to make sure that we looked at how if that was being recognized by the employees, if we're getting value from that. And I think clearly by these results here, we show it. The other thing too, before Brian jumps in here, these are a really great way to start a meeting. Is to use these cards, and it's because you go into a meeting and it's the staff meeting or something to that effect, and it's early and the coffee's half kicked in or whatever, but you spend the first 5 or 10 minutes just filling out cards and passing them around the room, kind of livens the discussion a little bit, and truly people feel appreciated when they receive that recognition.
Yeah, and I just want to say it's tied to the core cultural values that they've determined and that they've created. And I'll talk about that, and we'll go through that in a little bit. But it's very specific. It's not like, hey, just a recognition. It's tied to a core cultural value, so it's reinforcing that safety and that vulnerability. But we'll go over that in just a couple minutes. The next thing I want to do is allow Dan to finish up with the overall. What was the overall experience and outcome of the employee survey?
And as you can see here, there's a pretty significant improvement from the year over year on this. And part of our process in our survey is we share it with the board, but we also then share it with the staff in a meeting. And I think this pretty much to an employee were surprised by the improvement. So I was very heartened by that, to see that it was, for the first time, the work that we were completing was actually being reflected in the organization, and being recognized, and actually seeing some benefit from it. And it's not, there's not just one thing. The core values is the one thing we can point to say, so this is the significant difference, but it's living those values and everything, and incorporating them into our day-to-day vocabulary really was what really helped.
Yeah, and when we talk about putting those core values in your everyday verbiage, I'm talking emails. We're talking about those meetings, the recognition cards, the one-on-one meetings. It is literally becomes part of the language within the organization. But let me kind of do a little bit of a deep dive here into what culture is. And Dan has seen this visual probably 100 times, and I've seen it about 1,000 times. It's actually a really good visual. What it's saying is that if you're a company, we're a 10-person bicycle. Statistically speaking, 30% or 3 employees are pedaling with all their hearts. They're really coming to work. They're contributing. They're trying to move the needle. They're making a difference. 5 are just kind of along for the ride. They're pretending to pedal. They're there for a paycheck. You've all heard that before. Just here for a paycheck, kind of doing my job. I do what I need to do, and then I go home. But I'm not really interested in impacting the company any more than just doing what is expected of me. And of course, we've got those two fine people on the back, and they're the ones that are slamming on the brakes. They're the momentum, fakers, takers, and breakers. They are not momentum makers. They are doing anything and everything to make it difficult for the organization. They're the birds of a feather flock together kind of core value. And so the reason I bring this up, because that is what culture is. And so the objective is by being strategic thinkers and working with your leadership team and equipping them to, one, deal with the people on the back and become more of an agent of change, working with the folks in the yellow, is to really develop that core leadership team so that they're owning the core values. They're champions of the core values. And the idea is to take, obviously take some of those yellows and turn them into the green guys that are really pedaling their hearts out. And then, of course, what will happen is that the person in the red, the two people in the red, there's really two options, maybe three options. One, we keep them there, and they make everybody miserable, and we kind of accept it, which is really not healthy. The second thing is that the person that is in the red says, you know what, I don't fit this organization, and I need to go, I need to change, and they'll leave. The other possibility, and Dan and I, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. We had somebody who was in the red, and guess what? They're now green, and it does happen. They There are reasons why people go to the red, and are take that negative approach. And so our objective, of Vitruvian Leadership's objective, is to give them the skills and the tools to change that. And I'm not saying that I do it. I'm saying that the leadership team and other employees start to bring them in. They start to gain the kind of skills to be able to, and personal relationship to kind of bring that person along. And so that's the objective. That's what culture is. And speaking of culture, here are Allentown Housing Authority's core cultural values that we were talking about. They're the ones that are recognized on this card. Dan, do you want to talk about the process and kind of share about your core cultural values?
Yeah, so this started, this was part of what Brian brought in and introduced to us. And, it started with our core values assessment, and there was a group of staff, I think it was about 10 or 15, that were involved in this process. But it was the process of identifying what was important to us as individuals, but also what was important to us as an organization. But it's important to point out here, these are not, this is not a checkbox exercise. So, this isn't one from column A and two from column B and something from column C. This is, the core cultural values that were important to us as individuals and as as the Allentown Housing Authority. And it also was important to bring some definition to those. And so, these are the 5 core values that we came up with and identified. Safety matters, lead with purpose, encourage innovation, commitment to respect and integrity within. And the definitions are important because, so you see safety matters and it's like, oh, okay, well, I should wear my safety vest when I'm outside or something to that effect. But it's really, about, safety and dignity and well-being of our community. So it pulls the residents into making sure that we're creating a safe environment and safe community for our resident population. And then, lead with purpose as, creating opportunities and positive, successful results. And as we put these together, things like positive, successful results became important as opposed to just accomplish successful results. And so it's that definition like that really had a lot of significance because we spent a lot of time doing just that, putting in positive and taking out positive and how to refer to this. But the real value in this was we as a group developed them. They were ours. and that really increases the ownership of them. So, and that was important. This wasn't that we, had an Brian came in, did an interview with us, and then came back, at the next meeting and said, oh, okay, here's what I think your core culture values are. These were ours. They're unique to us. Another organization, that you might be sitting here and watching, your core values might be completely different, depending on, where you are in your space and what's going on in your community and within your organization. It's also important to realize, so this is not a vision or a mission statement. Those are things that are completely different. And one of the big differences is that in my view, the core values, they're a good pause button for situations. So as things go on and things happen, to sit and say, okay, so what core value are you reflecting, or what core value are you trying to reinforce, and really kind of forces you to stop and think and reflect, as opposed to just kind of blowing through and doing what you might have always done in the past. Because that's the big difference here, is that you start to do things differently, and that gets recognized, and it's kind of surprising how that gets picked up throughout an organization.
Yeah, it's really an organic process, Dan. And what I loved is that they go and they do the core values assessment. Vitruvian Leadership put it together. They do it online. They get it back. And then what I do is I take that and I put it into consensus. What were the common responses? And then I bring that in, and we go through a really neat process where everybody helps develop those core values. They have buy-in. They have ownership. That's the
Yeah.
key. So let me kind of go into explaining how that impacts the organization. When we talk about cultural transformation, it really is, we talked about the employee survey, which is really important because we can identify the pinch points. Are there managers that may not be as strong as we thought, or may not have the skills to handle their folks as well as they should? So when we look at culture, it's really about the current environment. Is it positive or negative? You'll hear me use the Star Wars, don't go to the dark side, right? And that's what this bell-shaped curve represents. There's a positive side and a negative side. Those who are resisting, that 20% on the left of your screen, they're creating an environment. They might be using manipulation, coercion, worse yet, force to impact their team. And so they create an experiential belief. They're not approachable. They have a pecking order. And we've all been there. I know we've all at some point worked in maybe that kind of environment. I know I have. And what happens is it creates action, and it is momentous. The only thing is that momentous action is on the negative side. It means that there's dysfunction. People don't talk. They don't share. And as a result, relationships break down. And there's people in corners kind of huddling and doing the birds of a feather flock together thing. Typically, that's led by positional, what John Maxwell calls positional. And it's all about my title. I'm the boss, so you have to do it. Now, the other side of that is the engagement side. It's the positive side. It's where there's people kind of in the middle, and they end up kind of being agents of change. Their potential to develop their personal awareness and professional awareness starts to kick in. They become servant leaders. And there are some people that are already there. They are all about engagement, which is the opposite of manipulation. They want to engage, they want to exchange, they want to share. There's alignment, there's trust. That's what this represents, and that's what we're looking for. And that's why the having those core values there help us stay on. It's what I would call a beacon, if you will, or a mile marker. That keeps us in the positive light of things because we have core values. So when somebody isn't performing as well as they could, we can have what we call a performance gap interview. So I'll just as an example, if you have somebody who is talk poorly to a vendor or to a resident, That really is about commitment to respect, and that's one of their core values. And you can have that conversation and say, we need to talk. Here's the expectation. Here's what we expect going forward. Are you having a bad day? Is there something I can do to help? But the bottom line is that there has to be a commitment to respect. And the truth is it's integrity within. And it makes that conversation so much easier, that performance gap interview so much easier. Um, one of the Dan, I'll ask you this because I know you can address this. In 2019, you said that you wanted to encourage innovation. That was the one you wanted to really focus on. And then what happened? Um, you know,
Yeah, this whole
COVID,
COVID thing showed up. Yeah.
right? And how did your team perform?
Well, and that's really one of the most heartening parts of this whole process is that we were doing all this work and just chugging along, and then COVID showed up and kind of blew everything up. But the everyone here really leaned into the process, and it was more um, what can I do or how can I help as opposed to tell me what to do. And if we'd had COVID in 2017, we would not have had that kind of successful
The cohesiveness.
cohesiveness. Very little finger pointing, very little people getting on board, and just a lot of pride in the work that we've done here and how we responded, and made us much more effective in what we've been able to do in the last 9 or 10 or however many months it's been since COVID showed up.
It really comes down to this: is that Dan purposely started to create a better environment. He really looked at the beliefs that people were having based on the employee survey, and he took action. And he didn't just take action as giving directives. He engaged his team. He got them involved and encouraged them to be part of this process. And there's a whole slew of things we did, but it really worked. And the reason it works is because it does improve results. It does improve relationships. We looked at the structural side and we looked at the relational side. And so let me introduce you to the Vitruvian leadership model, because that's really what it's called. LEAD. It's our strategic model called LEAD, and it's an acronym. It stands for something. The L stands for look beyond. The E is engage, equip, and enlarge the team. And the A is apply the strategy. And then the D is deliver the results. And I bring this up because each of those areas, there's some very specific things that have to occur. So you'll see here, I've got it broken up on the screen in relationships and also in the structural side. All right. On the relationship side, we want to look beyond. So when I came in to work with Dan, I asked him to really share with me, what is his vision? What is his compelling vision? What does he want to do? How can we create a culture of safety and vulnerability? And by the way, I hear this like vulnerability, guys in particular say, vulnerability is a problem. It's not a problem. Think about SEAL Team 6. They do an AAR after every scenario that they do. It's called an after action review. And because of that, because it's literally about safety and vulnerability. And if you aren't in step and doing what you're supposed to do, they talk about it. There's a reason why, because they want to create that vision that looks far ahead and understand that lives matter, that what you do truly matters. So in the look beyond phase, we really are focusing on executive coaching. I'm focusing with my clients on creating a compelling vision. What does that vision look like? We're doing the assessments, that baseline employee assessment. Extremely important, beginning process or beginning phase, because we really want to see where are those pinch points. How can we create a better future? And we've got to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, as they say. A little shout out to Clint Eastwood here. Equip and engage the team. This is about self-accountability and team accountability. It's about servant leadership, which is absolutely critical to all of this. It's about, excuse me, it's about focusing on team relationships, tools and techniques, and professional development coaching, which is a little different than executive coaching, right? It's if we can't be accountable to ourselves, how can we be accountable to a team? If we can't control our words, our thoughts, and our actions, then we can't be accountable to a team because we're not mature enough to handle our own self. So really important area, and I go there with the professional development in order to help folks, employees start seeing where they need to grow. Uh, then we go into the structural side. Now, the structural side is where we do what we call a job profile process. We map things out. We make sure that all the proper things are in place for human resource side. But it's very intentional, very purposeful. We're really defining the clear roles and responsibilities. We focus on quality controls. We talk about departmental core cultural values. We have the organizational core cultural values, then we have the departmental core values, and we're focusing on what we call key performance indicators. Now, key performance indicators are specific to the department. If I do what I'm supposed to do and I do it extremely well, it's efficient and effective, and it moves down the line to the next person. And when I talk about efficiency and effectiveness, think about if you jumped in cold water and you stay there, the body's going to be very efficient. It's going to take all the blood and go to the core organs. That's not what you want, and it's good, but that's not what you want. You want effectiveness. You want it to be going to all the capillaries and all out, and that's what we focus on. If I do a really good job and I know my job, I do it well. It's what I call drafting. If I can draft, if you put a truck behind a truck, you're going to save money on mileage, right? Because it's drafting. And so the idea is that if we focus on the key performance indicators and the job profile that we have, that it's going to affect the key performance area, which is the organizational or the bigger picture, which is operating income, operating ratio, some of those big numbers that are very important. And the reason for this is that we want to deliver those results. We need to make sure that there's measured results, that there's the feedback and the recognition, and that there's shared benefits. We want to focus on reporting. We want to focus on tactical adjustments and cost controls. And so that's where we deliver the results. And we're able to come back as a team from a strategic vantage point and say, where are we doing well? Where are we struggling? And how can we do better? Dan, do you want to add anything into that?
Yeah, just a couple things. We intentionally made a significant investment in in coaching, both for myself and for the leadership team. Found a lot of dividends from that. In a sense, because the coaching helped reinforce what we were trying to implement, but it also gave the individuals a chance to push back or ask questions and in a safe kind of that culture of vulnerability that we talk about here. It was a kind of a safe space to say, I don't really understand what's going on, and for people that don't really want to sit in a group meeting and say, I don't understand what's going on, or I'm frustrated by this, or I want to give some feedback on this because that gets really important. So I think that the coaching has paid huge dividends for us as an organization, but also understanding clearly the core cultural values, but these key performance indicators and areas are really critical, because if you think of housing or a housing authority or your management company, whatever the case might be, occupancy, right? There's very few places, if any, where occupancy is all one person's job. There's a maintenance part, there's a eligibility part, there's contractors, whatever else might be in that, and that all has to work together. And we all have to understand, if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, the next step can't happen, and so on and so forth. So identifying those, because we get a lot of we don't know what maintenance is doing, or whatever the case might be, or maintenance would say they don't know what the executive director's doing. But what this did is it kind of helped us break things down and see where the connections were, and where we were, where those choke points could be, and how to address them, and to get just kind of an understanding of, if we do it this way instead of that way, and everybody kind of says, oh yeah, that makes sense, kind of helps us make things work a little better.
Absolutely, because it really is about relational and structural. That's
Mhm.
what. So we focus on the relational part. That's the core cultural values. Notice it's right in the binder. I want to say this again. The core cultural values are it's the binding. It's the grout. It's the sinew that holds it all together. And we're able to focus first on the relationship, the people development, right? We want to improve team focus. We want to increase trust within the team and the organization. We're interested in increasing and improving communication, right? We decrease the finger pointing, the excuses, and the blame game, which was actually when I came into Dan, you can confirm this, that was a big issue. I didn't see that, or it's, maintenance didn't do this, therefore I can't do this. That had to go away. We wanted to make sure that we were fostering an environment of trust, training, and mentoring at all levels of the organization, which we started out with, really making sure that we're working at all levels of the organization and really working on personal and professional development. The structural side kind of came later. It was about a year into it that we started really focusing on the structural side. And the reason why is that it decreases, again, liability. It's about process performance and the results. We wanted to decrease those liabilities, but we had to see where those areas were. The job profile process and some of the systems we use allow us to do that. We can decrease liability. We can identify those cost controls and develop helpful measurements. What are the measurements? What are we trying to measure? Dan and I have gone back and forth a couple times on what are we trying to measure here? Am I correct, Dan?
Couple times.
Right? Couple times, right? Improve productivity and profitability, right? We also made sure that we hired to fit, not fix. How many times, we hire the person just because they're there, or we promoted somebody who really shouldn't be in the position. And so we tied in the core cultural values to make sure that that Dan and his team were making the proper fit. We address the measurable and observable performance gaps. We use those core values to have that conversation. We included the core cultural values in the employee survey. And when we do an annual review or performance gap interview with somebody, those core cultural values are absolutely tied into that conversation. In fact, they take center stage.
Yeah, as Brian mentioned earlier, I'm more of the structural guy. So the relationship part of this is the area that I really need to focus on and work with. But we like in trust, we had talked a lot was we were going through this about failing forward. So instead of just that it was okay to do something, not have it come out correctly, as long as we learned from that. That's takes takes a lot of time and a lot of commitment to get for everyone to embrace that. But as we went through that change, that empowerment I think is really valuable to the organization now and going forward. And as Brian was saying, the hiring process in this really you can't just hang the core values on the wall and say, here are the core values, we're done. You have to live this, you have to continue to reinforce it, and you have to ensure that it's going to continue. And part of the way you continue is you hire the right people, or you promote the right people. I've always tried to, in the hiring we've done, include the people that are going to work with the person in the hiring. So we had a maintenance interview and for a laborer or something, and one of the people that had been through the training was, we're doing this interview and starts firing all these core value questions at this candidate for this job. And it was kind of like, whoa, but they really took it seriously on, we're going to hire the right person here and continue this. And that, it's that accountability. It's, part of what Brian and I have talked about a lot is, you have to model the behavior. You have to be very careful, in being self-accountable. You have to model the behavior that you want to see, because if you're not modeling the behavior, you're just giving everyone an out to not follow through. So that's been one of the more conscious things I know in my experience through this. Is I've had to kind of step back a couple of times in coaching with Brian and stuff and say, I'm not really modeling. I don't know that I'm modeling the right behavior here, and reset things and change my direction a little bit.
And by the way, while I'm coaching, sometimes I realize I'm saying it, I'm preaching it, but I might need to go back and live it too myself. So, so with that, Dan's been a good mentor at times for me.
Yeah.
Just real quick, the outcome here is really important. We're getting down to the last couple minutes, so I want to make sure we leave a little bit of time. So I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, but I wanted to say that the byproduct of all this is that we really do get improved results. We start seeing alignment, collaborative strategies, self-accountability, team accountability, shared commitment, connection. We start seeing the blended benefits as a team. We start to celebrate together. We develop more trust because we're having success. Nobody goes to work to lose, they go to work to win. And so there's this whole trust thing that happens. And there's this whole personal and professional development and growth. It's so critical. And so another byproduct from the structural side is that we now have the quality controls in all the areas of the organization. We're starting to really see, we define the clear roles and responsibilities. We have the shared resources. There's team transparency, which is absolutely essential. People are really talking. There's follow through, feedback, recognition happening. The KPIs and KPAs are starting to be affected. In Dan's case, the KPIs are departmental, but those KPIs affect his REACT score. That's huge. And then they're able to sit down and have those performance gap interviews and have those kinds of conversations that are the hard conversations. And really what it comes down to is that for me, working with Dan, it was about helping Dan hone his skills as a strategic thinker, but more importantly, was for him to help his team become strategic thinkers, not just planning. And that's where the difference occurs. That's where it really happens. Dan, please.
Yeah, and a lot of times, so as we start to work through the transparency becomes important, but as you start to work through these processes for key performance areas and things like that, you get much better feedback, you get much better participation. And a lot of times you're kind of sitting there and it's like, well, why didn't you kind of bring that up before? And it's a real difference to where somebody feels empowered. They say it from hey, let's fix this, as opposed to, well, I'd do it this way. And that's a big difference. And sometimes, because we fall into the HUD role of, well, we got to do this to do that and whatever, and it's based on the regulations and blah blah blah. And what this allows us to do is to look back at it, and it's like, okay, what's the most effective way to accomplish this, and the most efficient way to accomplish whatever kind of fill in the blank process might be. And you really start to look at it critically, but you're also pulling in feedback from multiple sources.
That's right.
As you're developing that and completing that. So one, you get buy-in, but two, you also get some really good ideas on stuff that you might never have thought of, but the person that's been there for 6 months looks at it and says, well, why aren't we doing it this way? And it's like, oh yeah, why aren't we doing it that way? So yeah, it's really it's really critical.
It is a neat process, particularly as somebody who gets to kind of parachute in every couple months and see how they're doing and work with them. It's really a fun experience. Love what I do. When you're committed to your team, you develop trust and connection, right? That commitment transforms the character of your people and your organization. And I truly mean that. And I want to say this, that I've watched Dan take this to heart. He's committed to his team. And he's developed that kind of trust and connection with them. And their commitment to transform has been specifically designed because of his actions. And it's been very intentional. And because of his actions, they have changed. And his organization is much better for it. They've done a lot of hard work, and it's taken about 3 years to really, it was transitional to transformational. His organization is transformed, and COVID-19 certainly did help that. So, with that being said, I want to say you are the architect of your future, and Dan and I want to thank you for participating in this workshop. It's been a pleasure for us to be here and to share our models and our experience. Dan?
Yeah, well, I want to say thank you to Brian for his participation in all this. I'm sure we've taught him a few things about housing, and he's taught us a few things about leadership. And I think it's one of those things that's been mutually beneficial. But I also want to thank the Housing Alliance for giving us the opportunity to present this and share this with you. Our emails and phone numbers are here, so feel free to reach out. And if you have questions or want to
Yeah.
share more direct on the experience, uh,
Yeah,
we're
if
more
you
than
reach
happy.
out, I was going to say, if you reach out, I'll make sure that I get you a little PDF on employee engagement and some of the things that you can do to increase your employee engagement. So I put that out there. If you just email me and let me know that you were at this workshop, we'll send that out to you. Feel free to give us a call. Are there any questions? Any thoughts, questions? Really want to get a little bit of feedback here since we have a little bit of time. We were told we can go a little over if we need to. Let me see if there's
Don't see any up on the line online yet. So
questions. I feel like Ferris Bueller. Wait, how would you recommend helping your team navigate through significant changes in leadership, especially if they are apprehensive about the structural shift, as well as not being very receptive to change in general? That's a great question. Yeah, Dan. I so let me start
welcome to
with
my
this.
world.
Yeah. It's a great question. Let me start with this. That's a great question. It really comes down to this. There's a couple things. Number one, I strongly recommend if you're bringing in any kind of executive or major person to do what we call the Hogan assessment. Literally 75%, 72% of Fortune 500s use the Hogan assessment. I'm Hogan certified. And it looks at the positive, the bright side, some of the derailers that might be there, and are they a good fit? The other piece is making sure that they're a good fit, and then working with the team, giving them the opportunity to really learn about leadership and how they can support the leadership change and the change that's happening because of that structural shift. Dan, do you want to add to that?
But what I would also add to that is so transparency is a big part of this, and I think that we have to kind of remember, change is the constant. So change is always happening; it's always going on around us, and that the transparency. So why are we changing? Who's changing? But the core cultural values give us a rock to go back to say, okay, here's who we are. And because we've all heard the safe, affordable housing or whatever as a mission statement kind of a thing, but here are the core culture values. Here's who we are and what we are, and we make a commitment to that and make sure that we are reflecting that either in who we hire or how we put in a leadership team together. And I think if you have a solid leadership team that are committed to those values, you're gonna successfully navigate uh, a leadership transition.
Absolutely. And I would say change is a constant. We don't have control over that. There's always change. What
Yeah.
we do have is we have the choice. And the choice is if we are equipping, it's like equipping our kids. We make sure that we equip them when they leave our front door. And sometimes as an executive director and as a business owner, that's sometimes what it feels like. I'm just being a parent. But in a sense, that's what it is. We're equipping our team to look at those core values. I think of all the Italian ladies and church ladies that showed up at my house on Sundays, or my parents' house, I should say, and would sit there and I would tell the story and they'd be like, the bigger they are, the harder they fall if you're being bullied, or birds of a feather flock together. And they were trying to teach me those core values. A stitch in time saves nine. All of those things are about those core values. And I knew what it meant. And so when there's change, it isn't based on a vision. It's not based on a mission statement. It's based on those core values. And
Yeah.
here's why we're doing it. And that transparency comes across. Dan, I see him do it. He does it magnificently with his team. So that's how it's a great question because that
Yep.
is the question. How do you handle change? And it's all about that strategic thinking and handling the changes because they're going to come.
Yep.
Any other questions? We have a couple more minutes. Just want to make sure.
I think we've got the hook.
No other questions at this time. Thank you again for
Thank
presenting.
you. Thank you
Within
for
reach.
participating.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Take care.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.